of what we hope will be a lot of these Google Hangouts. We're just going to talk a little bit about the election, answer your questions. Oh, I talk about sort of what's going on. I think we've just made it public, so if you're just joining us, I'm Evan. This is the TPM Google Hangout, and this is our first one, so you have to bear with us as it might be a little bit bumpy. With me is Pema Levy. Say hello.
Hi.
And Benji Sarlin, co-blogger.
Hey.
All right. Okay. So let's just go ahead and start doing this thing. I've been given orders. I have a piece of paper in front of me, and so we're just going to start with that. The one thing I need to tell you guys to do, though, is if you're watching it and you are not a TPM person, but you're just a TPM reader, try to +1 this. That lets us find out how many people are watching it and how many people are tuning in. That sort of helps us as we sort of design these, when to hold them and what to do. So go ahead and hit your +1. You know, it's always fun. That's a little +1 rhyme. All right, so listen, the week has been interesting. We're getting towards the end of it, but I think the main story that we should talk about to start out with is this bin Laden thing. Obviously, we've reached the year mark since Obama ordered the killing of Osama bin Laden, and it's become a big thing on the campaign trail. Obama has sort of used it a little bit to both sort of bolster himself up, but also needle Romney a little bit, using some old quotes from Romney to suggest that Romney may not have done the same thing that he did. Romney, of course, is pushing back a little bit, but it's more other Republicans who are doing that. So I just kind of want to talk about this bin Laden politicization. Is it a real thing? Is it common? Is it really happening as much as is being said by, let's say, Republicans? So I don't know, Benji, you and I did a story about that, about sort of these stages of Republican grief and how the GOP has handled bin Laden since he was killed last year. Maybe you want to just sort of take us through that and start out, and then maybe throw in some of your own opinion.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting issue for this election because it's really completely unique in that this is the only issue of the entire election that everyone agrees is something Obama did that's good. No matter what your politics are, no matter who's running against him, you know, from Mitt Romney all the way down, no one looks at bin Laden being killed and goes, oh man, how could he go kill bin Laden? What a screw up. So how you deal with it as a result becomes very complicated. You know, you can't exactly attack him the way you normally do with most issues where it's as simple as, oh, Obama blew it, Obama did it wrong. You have to come up with some other angle. And the one that Republicans seem to be settling on the most is, well, we shouldn't really be allowed to talk about this much in the first place. You know, it happened, we all like it, good for Obama, but we're not allowed to talk about it. That would be politicizing. So to that effect, we've seen a kind of honing of that message. First, it was just press releases from people like John McCain saying, oh, you know, why are you trying to divide us and politicize us? You know, never mind what happened in 2004 and 2008 when Republicans just aggressively slapped Democrats for being weak on terrorism. But now we're seeing a more honed approach where they're saying, well, maybe you don't care about how John McCain or Mitt Romney feels, but what about poor SEAL Team 6? There's this new focus in the last 2 days to say that somehow talking about Obama's decision to catch bin Laden in that raid and kill him, somehow by talking about it all, you denigrate from the job the SEALs did, and somehow we aren't talking about them enough as a result. So I think that's something we're going to see a lot. The question is whether it helps Obama just having this stay in the news. Maybe they should just ignore it and just let this news cycle pass.
Right. Okay. I mean, I think that's an interesting point you're making about the sort of this divide with these. There's these ads now, and this idea of sort of talking about SEAL Team 6 and protecting SEAL Team 6, which seems weird. I mean, SEAL Team 6 has like razor-toothed dogs. I think that they can protect themselves pretty well, but you know, I don't know. Pema, you watch a lot of these. You've been watching a lot of these appearances, these candidate appearances. You know, you watch all the Romney stuff, everything else. Do you guys sort of have any general impression of how Romney's been playing this, and what do you how do you sort of think that fits into some of the talk about foreign policy that we've been having even before the bin Laden conversation?
Yeah, I actually think that Romney has changed his tone recently. If you go back a couple months, he was a lot louder when he was talking about Obama and foreign policy and really hitting him. And now that we're really talking about bin Laden and something that everyone, again, like Benji said, agrees that he did right, it becomes really tricky for him, and especially on this anniversary. So he's kind of scaled it back, and he's, Obama went to Afghanistan, and Romney said, that's great, that's awesome. He was just all positive. He didn't say anything bad. But what you did see was his surrogates go out and sort of try to thread the needle and try to sort of poke holes in Obama's triumph on bin Laden. And so you had, the day after Obama was in Afghanistan, you had Tim Pawlenty, his national co-chair on his campaign, go on TV and say, well, we're really happy that he went and talked to the troops. That's what the commander-in-chief is supposed to do. But, he reiterated his, 2014 withdrawal date, and that's an arbitrary deadline. And, we're going to have a foreign policy that's not based on arbitrary deadlines, but it's based on fulfilling our mission. So they're still trying to needle him and get in these attacks, but it's really awkward, and it's really awkward for Mitt Romney especially. He really has to send out his attack dogs to do it for him, at least this week. I'm sure as the campaign progresses and bin Laden himself is a little bit more out of the news cycle, he'll become more aggressive again.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting point because you have seen Republicans not all speak with one voice on this. When Obama went to Afghanistan, you saw a couple of Republicans say, well, this doesn't look so great. Maybe he's trying to spike the football. They're all worried he's going to go over there and talk up what he did. But McCain, prominent Romney supporter, of course, right away said, no, this is a good thing. I'm not going to say anything bad about it. I'm not going to say anything to criticize it. Romney didn't really either. So it does seem like they're sort of divided as to how to play this. But they do seem to want to try to play it. So I guess the final, which in itself is kind of an issue. Like they want to try to engage on this, which maybe is because Obama is making it such a big part of what he's been talking about. So I guess the final question on this is: do you think that there will be any backlash? Is it possible that there could be any backlash? There's been so much criticism from some quarters of Obama. Maybe over-politicizing this and talking about it too much. I mean, we're seeing from all different kinds of people. I mean, Ariana Huffington all the way to, your various Fox News types. Do you think there's any chance that any of this will have any backlash for Obama and could end up hurting him at all? Benji.
This is the scenario in which that does happen, and it's hard to tell because we really are in uncharted political territory. It's possible that what if everything Republicans say is true and they really just are the more naturally trusted party, no matter how unfair it is, on national security? It could eventually just become kind of jarring to people to watch Democrats just keep going on about this, especially when there's on the record so much criticizing Republicans for doing the same exact thing in 2002 and 2004 and so on and so on. Maybe eventually it just gets to look a little unseemly, but I really don't think in general the Obama campaign is concerned that I think they pretty much think that anything that keeps the conversation about that time the president ordered the raid on Osama bin Laden is probably in the end going to work in their favor. I mean, unless maybe if he pulls like a comic book character thing and just emerges, crawls out of the ocean as some super bin Laden and there's this whole, everyone has to figure out what went wrong, maybe that'll make people reconsider. But in general, I think it's hard to see that narrative really pushing through.
All right, Pema, you agree with that, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think that if Republicans really, I feel like the stuff that they did in 2003, 2004 about Iraq just sort of goes to show that they would be doing the same thing now. And I sort of doubt that the rules are really that different when it comes between Democrats and Republicans when it comes to who can talk about foreign policy and advertise their successes. I think I saw this on Twitter, but someone said, look, if you accuse someone of spiking the football, then you admit that they scored a touchdown. And the more you talk about it, the more you emphasize the fact that this is something that they did, and you also sort of can look like a sore loser and not wanting to just get on board and be happy about this. So I think it's really tricky for Republicans as well, and I'm a little bit more on the side of, Democrats probably aren't too worried about the fact that this is an accusation they got this week, and overall it's a big winner for them.
Okay. All right. Well, Super bin Laden aside, let's move on then to something I did yesterday, which I went and visited. I stopped off at Romney's stop in Chantilly, Virginia. Romney's in Virginia this week. He was in Virginia yesterday, doing a campaign event in Chantilly, Virginia with women entrepreneurs. And then he was at a fundraiser with Bob McDonnell, the governor of Virginia, who is a short-list VP person, last night. And then today he was in Portsmouth down in the coastal region of Virginia with McDonnell and Michelle Bachmann, who has decided to finally endorse Romney and gave him a sort of full-throated shout-out today. This gives us a time to talk about Virginia a little bit. We've done some reporting on it. We've talked a little bit about it. It's an interesting state. It seems to be it's going to be a huge battleground state, except for now Obama's kind of winning it fairly well. But the Republicans, we saw the Republican Party, one of the things that's going to happen this election is that the RNC is going to be doing a lot of the ground game type stuff for Romney. They've talked a lot. They're going to do a lot of this stuff for him. They're going to build out these victory centers. They're going to run a lot of the volunteers. Try to sort of help him play catch-up to Obama's, literally almost 4-year-long campaign that he's been building up. So today we saw the RNC, they had a press call about Virginia, and they talked a little bit about it, and they rolled out this new slogan, and Pamela, you were on that call. So why don't you give us a little bit of an impression about, give us a little bit of take on that, what happened, and sort of what they said about Virginia.
Well, they were talking about actually Virginia and Ohio, which is another state where they've been talking a lot about their ground game recently and what they're going to do. But what they're saying is pretty general, and it's basically a message about the economy. They're not really getting very specific about the states, even when sort of asked to get specific about their messages in the states. They're talking about the economy, they're talking about energy, they're talking about this being about, Obama's failures, and they don't really get very specific. I think alternately, the Obama campaign really wants to get specific in Virginia. This is a place where Bob McDonnell is governor, where he championed a law mandating ultrasounds for women seeking abortions. They want to talk about women in the state, which is what they're doing this week. And so for them, it's kind of a state-specific message, and at the same time, this has become a national issue, so it goes really well with their overall message to women voters. But this is a place where you're seeing the gender gap play out in polls, and I think that they sort of want to make sure that that stays where it is.
Right, and that's an important thing that you're saying, because what's most interesting to me about it was yesterday was all, like I said, it was all about women. Right. They had that women event, and then Bob McDonnell, who is term limited and can't run for re-election, is running these ads. Right, he's running these ads in Virginia right now. They're like, what a great governor he's been, and one of them features this female-owned business and how I think they sell like handbags and stuff. I mean, I don't know, it's like a gift place, but it looks like a nice business. But anyway, but this woman is just talking about how much McDonnell has done for her by making it easier to have business and by making the economy better, which is very similar to Romney's message of kind of like we're going to engage the female vote by not specifically talking to it like it's a female vote. We're going to talk to it about the same economic problems as everybody else. We're going to talk about the same sort of economic solutions as everybody else. So Virginia does seem to be a big battleground for that. And like you said too, there's McDonnell and Romney are in the same boat in the fact that McDonnell's trying to dial back from both a legacy he has from the last election when he got elected, when he had this thesis that he wrote while a student at a Christian law school that was at the time in 2009 viewed as very misogynistic, and then he was also oversaw those laws involving the transvaginal ultrasounds. And Romney has admitted that all the talk about contraception during the primaries has hurt him with women, and that they need to sort of fix that problem. So it's interesting to see both these guys sort of there doing that. Like I said, Romney, and the way Romney did it yesterday was surrounding himself with women. And Benji, do you have anything that you've done some stuff on this with Romney talking about that war on women, and this is an interesting place to talk about just because of this Virginia thing. Anything that you have to add to this discussion on that?
Well, I think the war on women fight is another good example of, it's sort of like the bin Laden fight, in which there's a serious question of how much Romney benefits from even keeping this topic in the news versus just trying to move on to the broader economy point. Mm-hmm. Women are right now going very strongly for Democrats. They usually do, especially in presidential years. They're a big part of Obama's winning coalition in 2008, and the numbers are looking really awful for Republicans right now. So The issue is that Romney seems to keep almost deliberately inviting fights over here. And because it's Democratic territory and it's a little tougher for Republicans to talk on it, especially when you're sitting next to Mr. Transvaginal Ultrasound himself, while you're touring Virginia, you often run into little traps. Yeah, and Michelle Bachmann, right. So one trap that they've been running into is that on a lot of these topics, Romney either hasn't had to think out his position too clearly because he's only been dealing with the right for the last year or 2 years, or the position, they may just be sort of trapped with the House GOP because they don't want to go against them, and they're way, way, way farther to the right on women's issues than probably even Mitt Romney is. So a good example is pay equity. Mitt Romney started going on about why aren't women getting more jobs, why are women getting disproportionately fired in the last year or so compared to men, but then Democrats just fired back, well, do you have any legislation you'd support that would affect this? Can you even explain why this is happening? And by the way, the legislation we passed, the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, do you support it? And got totally caught flat-footed. It really stepped on their message because the Romney campaign literally hadn't figured out their position on this extremely important piece of legislation. Right. So, and eventually they just sort of came up with this weird non-answer, which is, we wouldn't try to repeal it, but we're not going to say yes or no whether Romney would have signed it if he were president. So right, the more you talk about this topic, the more things like that come up.
Well, and all that came up yesterday again, too. This is one of those things that keeps happening to Romney, which is that he keeps sort of bringing up things that the president's campaign would love to talk about. He brings up women again, and immediately all the stories that I read include this, he hasn't made a decision about the Lilly Ledbetter Act. He won't say whether he'd sign it or veto it. He has said he wouldn't get rid of it, but he hasn't said whether he supports it or not. Has actually refused to say that he would when asked, saying like he's not going to get into hypotheticals or whatever. So yeah, I think so this Virginia fight is interesting because you're going to have this women issue and you're going to have all these other issues that these other parts of the campaign that are going together. But right now it seems focused on women, and it's just so interesting to see that fight looks the same as it did 2 weeks ago, basically, with Romney kind of trying to push his economic thing, being reminded about Lilly Ledbetter. I think it's something that he's going to have to try to break. He's going to try to break away from that, make it an offensive fight, less than a defensive one, and he hasn't seemed to really been able to do that yet. All right, well, people who are watching us, again, make sure to press that G+ so we know if you're watching and we can catalog it. Also, you can submit questions to us on the comment section. You can comment on our Google+ page. We can answer your questions. To that end, we actually had a lot of topics prepared, but this is going a little bit longer than I thought. So we're going to skip ahead, and we're going to go to one of our reader questions that we got before this Google chat started. And the question we got from one of our readers. It's a simple question with, it's kind of a broad question. Is the Democratic Party showing any signs that they have learned their lesson in the 2010 election? The person who sent this in made it very clear this person is not a Republican. So clearly, I guess they want the Democrats to learn their lesson. Let's just weigh in on that. Pam, Pam, you want to try that one first? Talk a little bit about that, about this lesson, 2010 lesson. Do you have any ideas about whether or not the Democrats have engaged? Have they learned anything since 2010?
Sure. I mean, I think that they have, and that they have to, take their competition seriously. Obviously, when you suffer a big defeat, you have to, be really prepared to go in the next time around and be really strong. I think one thing that I had mentioned earlier was, they really, rallying against Obamacare was a big thing in 2010, and so they're definitely, in general, the administration and Democrats have not really won the public over yet when it comes to health care reform. And so they have definitely done a push this year to try to convince them, and that's still a struggle that they're doing now. But they're trying to get out the word, especially actually to women and minorities, of how the health care reform bill is affecting them. Maybe this is a topic for another time. I think that a really good question is actually, have the Republicans learned their lesson? And when it comes to that, you can look at different states like in Utah or Indiana where they're putting forward Tea Party candidates, and sort of where the Tea Party is now, and if they can continue to push Tea Party candidates and end up with a majority in the Senate. I think that there's actually a lot of really interesting questions about whether or not Republicans are going to repeat mistakes that they made, even though overall 2010 was a big year for them.
Oh, I see. So you're just going to flip it around. We have a reader
I'm going to
question.
flip it around.
This is a reader wrote this in. He didn't ask? All right. Benji, can you do a better job of please taking to what the reader wants to know about? Thank you.
All right, reader. I'm going to question the premise of your question because that's how we roll over here. There's a price to pay if you ask us stuff. The biggest thing is that Democrats are lucky enough that the dynamic is very different in 2012, sort of regardless of what they do. Midterms are always different. They have very much lower turnout, and just sort of naturally the turnout tends to favor Republican demographics a lot more. For example, old people, they vote a lot more in midterms, and they are also the most likely to open that forwarded chain email about Obama. So there was a big, that's what the electorate really looked like in 2010. The groups that didn't like Obama in 2008 turned out big. The groups that did in 2008 were not quite as interested in voting the same time. 2012 is different. In a presidential election, people are paying much, much, much more attention. Turnout is usually much higher, and the Obama campaign had a lot more like firing up their base. But the biggest thing is that because the Republicans took the House, Democrats, no longer able to pass much, have a lot more time trying to figure out the politics of this stuff. So that means what we've already been seeing is trying to hold Republicans to very uncomfortable votes on issues like pay equity, on issues like the more popular aspects of health reform or on taxing the wealthy, things like this that they can really run a campaign on. And they have to spend a lot less time defending the very messy process of governing. One of the big problems with the healthcare reform is that they couldn't defend it that well because it was this long, ugly process, the sausage making. There were a lot of deals involved. A lot of people were upset that they weren't getting their particular favorite aspects of healthcare reform in there. And meanwhile, Republicans could just attack because they weren't really doing much to actually pass the bill. They had made it clear very early on that they weren't going to do anything about it. So Democrats were left with this awkward situation where they couldn't even defend it that much because a large number of their members were going to vote against it and try to run as like, oh, I'm independent from the White House on that issue. Now they're a lot more unified. Most of the things Republicans are going after are shared Democratic priorities. A lot of the very conservative Democrats who were undercutting their message, what a surprise, they got blown out by Republicans in 2010. So they have kind of a leaner, more unified Democratic Party, and I think that's going to serve them well going into 2012.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good read, and there's a chance that some of that is not it's not all luck. Some of it has been we've seen the Democrats have tried to push this fight a little bit, push things toward those issues that unify them. We saw this in this Violence Against Women Act. Democrats, were eager to get that on the floor and eager to get that battle going in Congress, something that really puts the Republicans back on their heels, and the Democrats can just sort of whistle along and not talk about the things that divide them. So I mean, I'm not going to go as far as to insult the reader by not answering the reader like Pema did, or by dismissing the reader like Benji did. But I will say that I think that it is a very, very different cycle. But Democrats did pay a lot of attention to what happened in 2010. I mean, I remember I spoke to a Democrat recently who talked about sort of in the lead up to that election having all this trouble creating messaging about the health care bill. That there would be just conference calls all over Washington trying to figure out, okay, we're going to sell the health care bill this way today. We're going to sell the health care bill this way today. We're going to sell it this way. And they couldn't really figure out how to do it. They were all kind of freaked out, pushing back against a lot of this Republican attacks. And this time, they feel like they're a lot more on solid ground with their messaging. That they are that they're able to sort of come together and all speak, as Benji was saying, in the same way, but in a more concerted sort of political way. Like, we're just going to stick to what we think. We're going to stick to our quick talking points. We're going to just drill in and try to do what we're doing. And of course, we have Obama leading things now, which makes it a lot different too. I mean, there's a unified, huge campaign at the top that's going to be pushing a lot of this stuff right along. So that's our attempt at answering our first reader question. Hopefully, we'll do more in future meetups. And I think that we're going to end it there. This has been 25 minutes, I think, of just pure political analysis. That I mean, I don't want to throw around the word game changer, but I think game altered, at least game alterer. So thanks a lot for joining us, and please send us your emails to talk@talkingpoints.memo and put Hangout in the subject line so we can know that you're sending a question for us, and we'll take those questions together and do this again sometime soon. So all right, guys, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.